Listen, I am about to articulate a perspective that will likely trigger a massive defensive reaction across the internet, but it is a truth that requires vocalization. Do you know what I see when I analyze the current social landscape? Men, high-functioning, successful, aesthetically disciplined, intelligent, men opting for voluntary isolation for years, not months, but years. And before you engage your defense mechanisms and start typing an angry rebuttal, let me pose a question to your rational mind. When was the last time you observed a genuinely happy couple under the age of 35? I mean authentically happy, not the curated, performative happiness we see on Instagram. Take your time. I'll wait. You can't recall one, can you? There is a profound sociological reason for that void. We have engineered a world where being alone has become the rational behavioral strategy for most men. It isn't necessarily the desired choice, but it is the logical one. It is comparable to choosing to walk rather than boarding a vehicle that has a 70% statistical probability of catastrophic failure. Do you understand the gravity of that analogy? The risk assessment simply doesn't favor participation anymore. Let me illustrate this with a psychological metaphor. Imagine you are at a casino, standing before a very specific high-stakes table. To take a seat, the buy-in requires your entire life savings, your emotional stability, half of your future potential earnings, and your mental health. The dealer informs you that, historically, 70% of players lose absolutely everything. Of the 30% who technically win, half of them report that the psychological toll wasn't worth the prize. Would you sit at that table? Any rational actor would walk away. Yet, that is precisely the gamble that modern relationships have become for men. And then society expresses confusion as to why men are choosing to withdraw from the market. I engaged in a dialogue with my cousin last week about this exact dynamic. He is 34, financially affluent, physically fit, dresses with sophistication. He is, by all traditional metrics, the total package. He confessed to me that he hasn't been on a date in 3 years. 3 years. When I probed for the underlying cause, his response was telling. He said, "Every time I open those dating apps, I feel like I'm applying for a job I am vastly underqualified for. The position of partner apparently requires a minimum height of 6'2", a salary in the top 5% percentile, property ownership in 3 sovereign nations, fluency in 4 languages, the comedic timing of a professional entertainer, the physique of an elite athlete, and the emotional availability of a clinical therapist. Previous experience as a psychic mind reader is also preferred. Here is the economic reality that few are willing to acknowledge. Women have priced themselves out of the market. It is analogous to watching a seller list a $1,995 Honda Civic for the price of a Ferrari simply because they installed new seat covers. They have fundamentally confused their intrinsic human value with their market demands, and when no buyers appear, instead of correcting the price to meet the market, they attack the customers for being too frugal. I recall a specific interaction from when I was 22. I met a young woman at a coffee shop. She worked in retail, cohabitated with 3 roommates, and had perhaps $200 in liquid assets. Yet, her dating requirements were astronomical. The man needed his own detached home, a luxury vehicle, regular international vacations, and enough leisure time to provide her with constant entertainment. I asked her, point blank, "What do you bring to the table to match that level of investment?" She looked at me with genuine confusion, as if I had asked her to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity. "I'm the prize," she declared. "The prize for what? For merely participating in existence?" This was not an isolated anomaly. This is a pervasive mentality I observe everywhere now. A collective narcissism. We see women who possess no culinary skills demanding personal chefs, women who neglect their physical health demanding elite athletes, women burdened with massive consumer debt demanding millionaires. This delusion is so widespread, it has become normalized behavior. Do you know what happens when you design a game where only one side can win? The other side stops playing. It is basic behavioral psychology. Men are not unintelligent. We are capable of performing a cost-benefit analysis. We observe our peers getting decimated in divorce courts, losing access to their children, and paying alimony to women who harbor contempt for them. We see good, decent men being mocked online for not meeting impossible aesthetic standards. We see the content. You know exactly which videos I refer to, where women gleefully admit to using men for free meals, coining the term foodie calls. They maintain WhatsApp groups where they strategize on how to extract maximum resources with minimum emotional investment. And then, these same women experience confusion regarding the disappearance of good men. Those men went home. They are engaging in video games, advancing their careers, and bonding with their male peers. At least in those environments, effort correlates with reward. But let me identify the true toxicity in this dynamic. It is not merely the unrealistic standards. It is the complete devaluation of the masculine contribution. A man today can labor for 60 hours a week, cover all financial liabilities, repair the infrastructure of the home, offer emotional containment, recall every anniversary, and execute romantic gestures. And what is the feedback he receives? That is the bare minimum, the baseline. My grandfather supported a family of 5 on a single income, and my grandmother treated him with reverence for that provision. She took pride in maintaining their home, cooking his meals, and respecting his leadership. Today, you must be a millionaire to elicit a simple thank you. And even then, the gratitude is conditional. Here is a psychological experiment I want you to conduct. Open any social media platform and search for the phrase, "men are trash." Tally the posts. There are millions. Now, search for "women are trash." Observe the disparity. One sentiment is celebrated with validation, likes, and supportive comments. The other is banned, deleted, and labeled as misogyny. We have normalized the systemic disrespect of an entire gender and then feign surprise when that gender opts out of the social contract. It is akin to spitting in someone's face daily and then wondering why they refuse to share a meal with you. I recently coached a client, a 8-year-old software developer. He is a good kid, introverted but genuine, earning $80,000 a year, which is substantial for his demographic. He recounted his last date. He picked her up, financed a dinner at a high-end restaurant of her choosing, and attempted to foster a connection. She spent the entire duration on her phone, curating stories about the food, tagging the restaurant, yet never once tagging him or acknowledging his presence. He was reduced to an Uber driver who happened to subsidize the meal. At the conclusion, she remarked, "This was boring," and departed without a word of gratitude. He spent $150 to serve as someone's unpaid content creation assistant. Do you understand why men are surrendering? But the cognitive dissonance deepens. The very next day, this same woman posts on Instagram, lamenting that men don't know how to date anymore, and asking, "Where have all the romantics gone?" The lack of self-awareness is extraordinary. She converted a romantic prospect into a social media photo shoot, contributed absolutely nothing to the interpersonal dynamic, displayed zero interest, and then projected the blame onto him for the lack of chemistry. This is the reality we are navigating. Let me address the housing issue, as it is a critical socio-economic factor. It is fascinating to observe a woman living in a shared apartment with 5 people, sleeping on a floor mattress, and consuming processed noodles, reject a suitor because he does not possess a property deed. It is like a non-swimmer demanding to date only Olympic gold medalists. The delusion is astronomical. In major metropolitan areas, perhaps 5% of men under 35 own property. This means 95% of the male population is automatically disqualified by this criterion. And then, women complain about the scarcity of options. The statistics simply do not support their expectations. I knew a woman, let's call her Anna. For 5 years, she systematically rejected every man who approached her. They were not tall enough, not wealthy enough, or not stimulating enough. She maintained a literal spreadsheet. I am not speaking metaphorically, tracking her requirements. Minimum height 6 feet, minimum salary $100,000, travel history of at least 10 countries, a graduate degree, and a vehicle valued at over $40,000. Anna was a receptionist earning $30,000 a year. Now, at 35, she is in a state of panic, lowering her standards daily like a retail clearance sale. Yesterday's must-haves have become today's nice-to-haves, and will become tomorrow's optional. But here is the cruel twist. The men she desires are now dating 2 5-year-olds who haven't spent a decade treating men like disposable commodities. Time is an undefeated adversary. Father Time remains unbeaten. Let's deconstruct the independent woman narrative that has been aggressively marketed. Do you know what is ironic? The most genuinely independent women I know, those who are truly successful and self-sufficient, do not broadcast it. They feel no need to announce it every 5 minutes on social media. They do not feature independent woman in their bio. Conversely, the women working entry-level jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, and borrowing money for leisure are the ones loudest about not needing a man. It is a defense mechanism. It is cope. Deep down, they are aware of the reality. The biological clock is a physiological reality, regardless of whether we choose to admit it. I witness the progression constantly in my consultations. At 22, the rhetoric is, "I don't need anyone, I'm focusing on self-actualization. Men are distractions." At 28, it shifts to, "I'm ready for something serious, provided he meets my 47-point checklist and passes the compatibility test I sourced from a magazine. By 33, the panic sets in. Where did all the good men go? Why is everyone taken? And by 38, I will date anyone with a pulse who responds to text messages and doesn't cohabitate with his mother. It is a predictable, cyclical pattern, like watching the same tragedy on repeat. The tragedy lies in the opportunity cost. They could have secured a high-quality partner at 25, but they were too preoccupied with finding themselves, which usually equated to weekend intoxication labeled as self-care. Men have recognized this pattern. Why should a successful 3-5-year-old man commit to a 3-5-year-old woman carrying emotional baggage, a combative attitude, declining fertility, and a sexual history more extensive than a sports roster, when he can date a 2-5-year-old who is genuinely enthusiastic about his company? This is not misogyny, it is market dynamics. You can detest it, write furious blog posts about it, and label it unfair, but that will not alter the reality. Reality is indifferent to your emotional state. Social media has completely distorted women's perception of reality. Every woman believes she deserves a man in the top 1% because she once matched with one on Tinder. In reality, he was likely married or using her for temporary entertainment, but she lacks that context. She internalizes that interaction as proof of her market value. It is akin to winning $20 on a slot machine and concluding you are a professional gambler. The algorithm feeds you what you desire to see, not what is realistically available to you. Do you want to know the most melancholic aspect? Most men are not asking for the world. Do you know what the average man desires? A partner who is pleasant to be around, who doesn't manufacture drama weekly, who is loyal meaning she doesn't have one foot out the door seeking an upgrade, who maintains her physical health reasonably well, and who actually likes him, not just the resources he provides. That is the list. Not a supermodel, not a traditional housewife, just a decent human being who reciprocates effort. Yet, somehow, that is deemed an excessive request. Instead, we encounter women who view relationships as business transactions, where they are the CEO and the man is an unpaid intern hoping for a permanent position that never materializes. The shaming tactics have also backfired spectacularly. Label a man an incel for having standards, and he will shrug and return to his hobbies. Shame him for not approaching women, and he will say, "Thank you for sparing me the rejection and potential harassment allegation." Tell him he isn't a real man for opting out of dating, and he will laugh while counting the capital he is saving. The shame is ineffective because men have realized that being alone is not the worst outcome. Being with someone who does not value you, who views you as a walking ATM, or who constantly compares you to her ex or to curated lives on Instagram, that is a fate far worse than solitude. I remember a moment, perhaps 5 years ago, that shifted my entire perspective. I was at a wedding, a lavish, 6-figure affair. The groom's facial expression during the ceremony was haunting. It wasn't joy. It was resignation. He looked like a prisoner of war signing a forced confession. His bride spent the entire reception complaining about trivial details. The flowers were the wrong shade of pink. The cake was too sweet. The DJ played the wrong remix. Never once did I observe a look of adoration directed at him. Never once did she thank him. 6 months later, they divorced. She kept the ring, the gifts, and the photos for her social media clout. He kept the debt and the clinical depression. And people wonder why men are apprehensive about commitment. We aren't afraid of commitment. We are afraid of committing to the wrong person who will dismantle our lives and walk away with the prizes. Here is what women fail to grasp about male loneliness. It is not painful for most men anymore. Why? Because we are natural problem solvers. Lonely? Acquire a dog. They are infinitely more loyal than modern partners. Need intimacy? There are solutions for that which do not involve talking back or demanding access to your credit line. Need emotional support? Male friendships are stronger than ever because we have realized we cannot depend on women for that stability. Need purpose? We focus on careers, hobbies, goals, building something that won't leave us for our best friend. Men have adapted to loneliness just as humans adapted to cold climates. We built tools and moved on. We have converted loneliness from a bug into a feature. Meanwhile, I see women in their 30 seconds and 40 seconds experiencing complete psychological breakdowns because they are alone. They post memes about wine consumption, mistaking alcoholism for a personality quirk. They post photos of cats with captions about being a cat mom. They share self-love quotes that fool nobody, least of all themselves. They bought the lie that they could have it all on their own timeline. Nobody informed them that men would simply stop showing up to the audition. Nobody told them that their window of opportunity was finite. They believed they could party through their 20 seconds, build a career through their 30 seconds, and then select a husband off the shelf like a handbag when they were ready. Surprise, the store is closed. The dating apps have exacerbated this catastrophically. They have given average women the illusion of infinite choice. She matches with 500 men in a week and feels like Cleopatra. What she fails to realize is that those men swiped right on everyone, without filtering. It is a numbers game for men. She isn't special. She is simply present. But that external validation becomes addictive. Why settle for one man when hundreds are messaging you? Except those hundreds do not want times her asterisk. They want sex, perhaps, but not a relationship, not commitment, not love, just a quick release and a goodbye. I advise young men now to abandon the apps entirely. It is a rigged game. Would you play poker if the dealer could see your cards but you couldn't see theirs? That is the dating app experience for the average man. You are competing against phantoms men with photoshopped abs, rented supercars, borrowed watches, and fake lifestyles. And even if you win, what is the prize? A woman who believes she is settling for you. A woman who will perpetually wonder if she could have done better. That is not a prize, that is a prison sentence. The traditional avenues for meeting partners have also been systematically destroyed. Approach at work, you risk an HR complaint and your livelihood. Approach at the gym, you are labeled a creep, and your photo is posted online for mockery. Approach at a bar, you are a predator. She is just there to dance with her friends. Approach on the street, it's harassment, and the police might be called. Approach online, you are one of hundreds in her DMs. Yet, simultaneously, the complaint arises. Why don't men approach anymore? Where did the confident men go? It is like installing fire alarms on every door, and then wondering why nobody enters the building. Let me speak about investment, a concept men understand intuitively. When you invest, you expect returns proportional to the risk. The stock market might lose your capital, but it might also make you wealthy. That is a fair, reasonable trade-off. But modern relationships represent high risk, with guaranteed negative returns. It is like investing in a company that promises to take your capital, provide no dividends, blame you for not investing more, and then seize half of your remaining assets when they decide to dissolve the partnership. No rational economic actor would make that investment. And the double standards, my God, they are ubiquitous. A woman can enforce a strict height requirement, and society applauds. You go, girl. Know your worth. A man expresses a weight preference, and he is labeled shallow, fatphobic, and a terrible human being. A woman desires a wealthy man. She knows her value. A man desires a younger woman. He is a predator, creepy, likely a pedophile according to Twitter discourse. A woman refuses to date a short man. That is a preference. Respect it. A man refuses to date a single mother. He is immature, not a real man, and unable to handle a real woman. The game is rigged. The rules apply only to one side. The psychology underpinning this is both fascinating and terrifying. Women have been conditioned to believe they are perfect as they are. No improvement required, ever. You are a queen. You deserve the world. Never settle. Conversely, men are told they are inherently defective and require constant improvement. Work on yourself. Be better. Do more. You are not enough. So, you have one gender that believes they deserve everything without effort, and another gender exhausted from effort that yields nothing. What did we anticipate would happen? This is basic cause and effect. I reviewed a study, recently legitimate research, not anecdotal evidence, showing that women rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness. Reflect on that statistical impossibility. How can 80% of a population be below the average? That violates the definition of an average. But it illustrates the level of delusion we are facing. The average woman believes the average man is beneath her, and then we wonder why unhappiness is rampant. We wonder why relationships fail. We wonder why marriage rates are at historical lows. The men who are successful with women today share a common trait. They do not care about women's opinions. They have internalized that female validation is a worthless currency. They treat women like children, throwing tantrums amusing, but not to be taken seriously. And ironically, this indifference attracts women more powerfully than any amount of genuine care ever could. What a twisted psychological joke. The men who would make stable partners are invisible, while the men who treat women poorly are in high demand. But here is the thing about consequences. They are indifferent to feelings or excuses. Women in their 40 seconds are learning this lesson painfully. All those men they rejected in their 20 seconds are now married to younger women, or are happily single with capital in the bank. That attitude they displayed? Nobody finds it cute anymore. The demands they made? Nobody is attempting to meet them. The market has spoken clearly, and it said, no, thank you. and now they are angry at men for not desiring them, as if men owe them attention after decades of disrespect. The solution? There isn't one. Not really. This is the bed we have collectively made as a society. Women will not lower their standards until it is too late, and by then, men will not care. Men will not participate in a game they cannot win. And why should they? The birth rate will continue to plummet. Loneliness will rise like floodwaters. In 20 years, we will look back at today as the good old days, when at least some people still attempted to connect. My advice for men? Focus entirely on self-actualization. Build your wealth, your health, and your psychological happiness. If a woman adds value to your life, excellent. If not, you have lost nothing and preserved everything. For women, ask yourself if your standards are based on reality or an Instagram fantasy. But honestly, most will not listen. They rarely do until the window has closed. And then they blame men for their own choices. This trajectory will continue until the pain becomes unbearable for everyone. Until women realize that having standards is healthy, but having delusional standards is self-sabotage. Until men realize that some women are worth the effort, just not the majority. Until society admits that perhaps the old ways weren't entirely oppression and patriarchy. Maybe some of those structures actually functioned. Maybe our grandparents possessed wisdom we have discarded. Let me recount another story that perfectly illustrates this madness. Last month, I was at a bar with friends. There was a group of women next to us, late 22nd or early 32nd. They were loud, projecting their conversation. One was complaining that she couldn't find a decent man. Her friends were validating her. Men are trash, they don't commit, they're all players. Then she opens Tinder to demonstrate. She has literally thousands of matches. Thousands. She is swiping left on everyone. Too short, too ugly, looks poor, probably boring, definitely has a small member. Ew, why would he think he has a chance? These were actual quotes. I am not fabricating this. Then she complains again about being single. The cognitive dissonance could power a small city. I have noticed a pattern. The women who complain the most about male inadequacy are usually the ones bringing the least to the table. It is psychological projection at its finest. They work minimum wage jobs but demand a CEO. They cannot cook but want a chef. They are physically out of shape but want an athlete. They have untreated mental health issues but want a therapist boyfriend. They bring chaos but want peace. They bring debt but want wealth. They bring baggage but want a fresh start. And when you point this out, you are labeled a misogynist who can't handle a strong woman. No, I can handle a strong woman perfectly fine. What I cannot tolerate is a delusional woman who thinks watching Netflix constitutes a personality trait. The most damaging aspect is how this impacts younger men. I receive messages from 18 and 9-year-old guys who are already surrendering. They haven't even started the race, and they are already defeated. They observe the landscape. They see the impossibility of the expectations, and they are choosing preemptive withdrawal. Can you blame them? When you watch your older brother, your cousin, or your father get dismantled in divorce court, when you see good men treated like financial utilities, when you see disrespect normalized everywhere, why would you sign up for that enlistment? There is a phenomenon I call the backup plan delusion that many women harbor. They ride the carousel in their 20 seconds, have their fun, and then assume they will settle down with a nice guy in their 30 seconds. But here is what they fail to understand. That nice guy they rejected at 23 is not waiting in stasis. He either found someone who appreciated him early on, or he has built a life where he no longer requires their validation. He has his money, his hobbies, and his peace. Why would he trade that sovereignty for someone who views him as plan B? And the financial aspect, Jesus Christ. Modern women desire traditional provision with none of the traditional roles. They want you to subsidize everything but also perform half the domestic labor. They want you to be the breadwinner but have no authority in decision-making. They want your resources but not your opinions. It is like hiring a CEO but informing them they cannot make executive decisions. Who would accept that contract? I will never forget a consultation I had with a successful entrepreneur in his early 40 seconds. His girlfriend of 2 years had just left him. The reason? He suggested they split the cost of a vacation 50/50, since she also earned a substantial income. She reacted with rage. She called him cheap and declared that a real man pays for everything. This woman earns $90,000 a year and drives a BMW. But the mere suggestion that she contribute financially rendered him not a real man. This is the insanity we are dealing with. The social programming runs so deep that even men who see through it still struggle. We are biologically wired to protect and provide. But protect and provide for whom? For someone who posts on TikTok about how men are useless? For someone who maintains a roster of backup options on her phone? For someone who views you as an accessory to her lifestyle? The juice is no longer worth the squeeze. And men are finally waking up to this reality. Do you know what is rarely discussed? The peace that comes with male solitude. No drama, no circular arguments, no emotional roller coasters. You return home to silence. Your money remains yours. Your time remains yours. Your decisions are yours. You want to purchase a motorcycle? Buy it. Want to invest in crypto? Do it. Want to spend the weekend gaming? Nobody is complaining. This isn't loneliness. It is freedom. So yes, men are staying single for years, and women are largely to blame. Not all women, but a critical mass sufficient to alter the entire game. And until women collectively admit this, nothing will change. Men have already adapted. We are comfortable being alone. The question is, are you? Because from my vantage point, it appears you are not handling it well at all. And every year that passes, every birthday that goes by, your options contract while ours expand. That is not revenge. That is simply reality. And reality, as they say, remains undefeated.